consent-based solution for the storage of nuclear waste, one that does not force it on those unwilling to accept it, no matter where that proposal may be. Yucca Mountain does not maintain the safety of Nevadans who neither produce nor consume nuclear energy. And I want to thank Chairman Grijalva for his leadership. Recently, so we've killed Yucca 3 times this year.
It's like a vampire there.
It does keep coming back. It sucks all the blood out of you. Congresswoman Titus, Susie Lee, and I worked along with Mark Amadei, and I will give credit where credit is due because he's a member of the Appropriations Committee and voted with us to prevent Shimkus's amendment, which would have provided the funding to start the relicensing of Yucca Mountain. That was proposed in the appropriations bill back in June and July, and the subcommittee on energy defeated that amendment by 1 vote. 1 vote. Every vote matters. That same vote, when it came before the House of Representatives just 2 years ago, passed, overwhelmingly. We actually were able to flip 11 of the 14 Democrats who had voted sadly against us. They changed their position and voted this time to defeat the Shimkus Republican amendment. So that was the first time we defeated it. Then they brought it to the Rules Committee in an effort when they were going to vote on the appropriations package to be able to have an amendment on the floor so that they think that they can get it to the floor. There's more likelihood that it will pass. We were able to work with Jim McGovern, the chairman of the Rules Committee, and we defeated it once again. Well, here they are yet again. They had a bill hearing in the Energy and Commerce Committee, and Shimkus proposed a package of measures along with a congressman from California, and that actually did move out of the House Energy and Commerce Committee. But the way the rules work is that there are multiple committees of jurisdiction on a policy like that. It's not just up to the members of Energy and Commerce alone. And one of the other committees of jurisdiction is the Natural Resources Committee. And so I approached the chairman and asked him and his staff if they would be willing to not waive their jurisdiction. Typically, other committees of jurisdiction, when they don't really want an issue, they just waive their jurisdictional control, which means that it will not come to our committee. So the chairman agreed that he would not waive, and that means that that bill comes to our committee. And I'll let you, Chairman, tell the group what that means for that bill.
You effectively kill it. Because we're not going to have a hearing on it, and it's not going to move forward, so that you've neutralized the legislation. And I was very happy when Mr. Horsford and the delegation from Nevada came forward. In the past, our committee has waived too many times in the history our jurisdiction, and we retained this one, and we will continue to retain it, which provides another source of opposition, which is very important because DNC has passed it, but it can't proceed to the floor, and nothing can happen unless there's a hearing and a formal markup and a formal vote on the part of our committee. And I and Mr. Horsford and the delegation had no interest in having a hearing or a markup, so it effectively dies.
Which I am extremely grateful, because had there been another chairman in that seat, we know what that would mean for Nevada and for Yucca Mountain. And so I know Senator Cortez Masto and Senator Rosen are working hard in the Senate to continue to protect any measure. We have to stay vigilant because there are bills and omnibus bills that they can try to put it in at any point. But we have successfully defeated it on the House side now 3 times. And again, this has been a full delegation effort. And Congresswoman Titus and Congresswoman Lee and Mark Amadei and I have worked very hard and closely together on that. The second issue is the Desert National Wildlife Refuge and the Nevada Test Site and Training Range Withdrawal and Management Act. This legislation, as I said, preserves the jurisdiction of the refuge and boundaries of the Nevada Test Site and Training Range, while also providing Nevada's service members and at Nellis Air Force Base and the NTTR the resources that they need by supporting modernization requirements and accounting for increased public safety needs. As all of you know, there was a proposal by the Air Force to really take over all of that and to use all of it for training. And I objected to their proposal initially based on the grounds that for more than 20 years there was already a memorandum of understanding in place. You all educated me about this, between the Air Force, BLM, and wildlife that was never adhered to. And over those years, a lot of waste and impact to our public lands has occurred. And so we need to, though, come up with an alternative to their proposal. And so Senator Cortez Masto has introduced that bill in the Senate. I now have the companion bill in the House, which will move according to the chairman's desire throughout the process later this year. The Wild Refuge is one of the most pristine and unaltered landscapes in the United States and has provided vital sanctuary for Nevada's natural environment and wildlife for more than 80 years. Nevadans should have continued access to this treasured land, and I hope this legislation will provide the DNWR with the increased protection it rightly deserves. And so we'll love to hear more on your thoughts today about what that means to you and the work that you all are doing. And then finally, I'd like to cover the Clark County Lands Bill. To be clear, I have not signed off on the bill, and I have been very open and receptive to supporting a public lands bill, as I have done in the past. But my standards are that I would like to make sure that there is consensus among local stakeholders, the environmental community, the tribal leadership, representation from our Air Force, of course, the city and county, and others. Because for me, as a member of Congress, to bring a major lands bill, it requires the fact that we have to have consensus on the ground. And so that's why I wanted to be able to hear from you. In the event, like this roundtable, there is an opportunity to receive input from local stakeholders and to really help shape our efforts in Nevada. So I know that this is a priority, and I want to be ready. Today is one opportunity for us to have that conversation, and I'll continue to have other conversations throughout the rest of this year. I don't know when this will move, but we have to be ready in the event that there is a vehicle. So with that, I know there may be other topics that people want to cover, but those are the three issues that I definitely wanted to highlight, and to thank you again for all of your great work on making this happen. None of this happens in a vacuum or without your support. So with that, I'd like to give the chairman just a few minutes to say some remarks, and then we'll open it up.
Thank you very much, and it's good to be back in Nevada, and in particular Las Vegas. You know, I appreciate Mr. Horsford's presence on the committee. His return to this committee, he's a valued member, and his efforts toward inclusion, working toward a consensus-based decision, looking for those points of compromise and of agreement are very important, particularly in times right now when everything seems to be my way or the highway, and it's everything is very divided and very ugly. And so I want to appreciate that, and I think your presence here is a good indication of tribute to the fact that, you know, the discussions need to occur. You can't blindly drop things on people and then expect an automatic source of support when questions haven't been answered and concerns have not been dealt with. A couple of tangents, you know, about Las Vegas. Mona and I owned a timeshare we bought 30 years ago here. It was a memorable night we can't remember, but my daughter uses it now. So I guess I'm a taxpayer. My boys, the Raiders, are moving to Las Vegas, and I didn't appreciate it when they moved to LA. I've come to the conclusion that, yes, it'll be fine. I'll come to some of the home games, it'll be good. And then a compliment, I think, this morning when I got up at 8 to get coffee, about 8 o'clock, 7:30, 8 o'clock, at the hotel. There's some equality here in Las Vegas, regardless of zip code and income, ethnicity, national origin, gender identity, gay or straight. There's a real sense of equality, especially at 8 o'clock in the morning, because everybody looks the same at that hour. There's no distinction on that, and I think that's a little microcosm of what could be, or maybe it shouldn't be. But anyway, that was, the committee, this time I was telling my friends earlier, this is my first opportunity to be chairman of it. And as, I personally gain confidence in the position, so too, trying to move this committee in a direction. We're in a funny time. We're in a time where we have a divided government. Not only do we have an administration that seems to be intent on breaking the multi-use mission of Interior and destroying that, and an administration that seems to think that our public lands and waters are commodities to be used and discarded. And so conservation, protection have become secondary, if that, in that discussion. And then you have the Senate, the abyss, as I like to call it, where we've passed some really good pieces of legislation regarding offshore drilling, regarding increased protections around conservation, wilderness designations that had not existed before, we're going to have an environmental justice bill, comprehensive one that'll be coming out pretty soon, mining reform, which is always something I enjoy coming to debate about, I'll tell you that. But anyway, we'll be here for that one too. And other pieces of legislation, and one of the other things that we're doing is not just raising the profile, but putting some substantive support in terms of the subcommittee on the indigenous people of the United States, and dealing with tribal governments and indigenous communities across this country, not just about raising the profile, but really going to that government-to-government trust responsibility issues, and thank you for being here, Madam Chair, and the council member as well. And so we're going to look at a codified consultation process. We're going to talk about strengthening sacred sites, both on-res, off-res designation, so that tribes have input over those kinds of decisions that are affecting them very directly. Monday, Martin Luther King's Day, I'm on tour, 100 miles of border that the Autumn Nation has with it, where the construction and the real ID and the waiving of laws has occurred, and what it's doing to sacred sites, and what it's doing to that. So I think raising that profile is not just a field that we're trying to put some substantive prerogatives, legal and otherwise, into the consultation process, so it's something real. And so that, stapling something to a community center is not consultation. That there has to be a back and forth, and there has to look at options, and if there's disagreements, this bill is gonna call for arbitration, so that we have resolution at some point. And so I think that's an important piece of legislation to strengthen the trust responsibility that all members of Congress are constitutionally obligated to uphold. And we made, as Mr. Horsford said, we made climate change a central issue. Our public lands and waters are 24.7% of the problem, and they're also 24.7% of the solution. And so we're going to promote policies around those areas that start taking us to the solution side of the equation. That's the things that we've been working on. There's a lot of individual bills. We have good members that have put legislation forth that we've passed in the House that lingers in the Senate. One of the areas that Mr. Horsford and I were talking about earlier was at the end of the year there'll probably be a major land package or something put together And that's where we have to be particularly vigilant on issues like Yucca Mountain. I find it interesting that the administration is now declassified, or attempting to declassify uranium, and making it a critical mineral. It has never been a critical mineral in the past. So that means that it would have to go through a process, a public process, regarding extraction. It would become like any other mining situation, that you'd have to do some studies and what are the consequences, etc. By designating a critical mineral, it expedited that, and you go through, you skip processes, impact studies, and so that you can promote the extraction. And with it, this really interesting sweetheart deal that to US-based uranium mining companies, that they would, that the government would guarantee them a profit. So whatever they extracted, if they couldn't sell it on the market, that the government would buy it. And then it would involve processing as well. And it strikes me that the people that are promoting that from states, including Arizona, that promote the idea that the waste they generate and the excess that they generate and the toxics that they generate, it's okay to move them into somewhere else. So that, it's a chicken and the egg situation. Before you talk about expansion, you have to talk about how you're gonna remediate. And we have not done that, and I think that's the strongest argument that I have, not only against Yucca Mountain, but against an expansion without dealing with the consequence of what you're going to do with this waste that has been this issue's been with us. We're always open to your comments and suggestions, your complaints. You can take them to Mr. Horsford directly. I'm very sensitive about those things. But and I also want to acknowledge and please extend to my friend Titus in regard. I couldn't get a hold of her on the floor to tell her that I was going to be here, and to member of the legislature, thank you for being here as well, and looking forward to the discussion. The Yucca issue is not something I need to be convinced at. I think it's more a strategic discussion that we have to have with the delegation of how we continue to stop it. And the other two, I think, are discussions we need to have in terms of what the consequences are. In terms of the Clark County, the concerns that I have is, and I've shared them with the congressman, and that's an effort that's going to be made to try to do, is not to skip any processes, whether it's NEPA, ESA, public's right to know, accountability, and judicial review. That planning process, I think is critical to building consensus, so that there's a level of trust in the public if we're going forward with a compromise at some point, that the checks and balances are part of any planning process. So we'll get into those details, and I'm sure you will too. Honestly, they're not at hand right now to be able to go into a lot of specificity. In terms of the two companion bills that were just filed, as this draws more and more to consensus, I understand that both the senator and the congressman are trying to put a template down so it doesn't become the all or nothing recommendation that we have from the Air Force right now in terms of that, and that something is preserved, and it's that balance issue that is critical. That how we deal with the Air Force's mission, national security wise, and how we deal with the mandate of conservation and protection. And right now, as I see the Air Force's proposal, it's a mission and nothing else. And I think what the senator and congressman are trying to do is to, in a very strong way, interject that discussion. And we're open to that discussion. We're open to hearing from it. But the reservations at this point are the all or nothing reservation that I told you about, because I worry that as the door closes of this particular administration, God, It's like dog years, you know, it seems like it's been 40 years they've been there. That there's gonna be efforts to try to get as much done and undone as possible in a very short period of time. And I don't want this to be one of them. You know, I would resist efforts to rush something because of just national security at the expense of other things. And I think the effort that's ongoing is to try to find some consensus. It's hard for me to define what I mean by middle ground, but that's kind of where we're at. So we're open to that discussion, and if not, you know, the effort is to delay that to where there is then an administration that we can work with that incorporates that at the beginning of the process and at the end of the process. This should have been done, but now you need to have some template legislation that kicks that process into place, and I think it's kind of backwards, but that's kind of what we're confronting with this administration, so. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Appreciate it.
Chairman. Thank you very much. So again, I'd love to make this a conversation. Maybe the way we structured it is to maybe cover the Yucca Mountain questions first, and then go into the desert refuge bill second, and then public lands and other issues third. So if you have a question or a statement regarding Yucca Mountain, please state so, and again, just remind us your affiliation, and the floor is yours.
I don't think there's much difference of opinion here in this room about Yucca Mountain. And the only question is how to oppose Yucca Mountain and keep it from being built. So I'm not sure that we need to spend a lot of time discussing
Strategic question.
the details of Yucca Mountain and just how do we prevent it from happening.
Yes.
Christian Gerlach of the Sierra Club. So we are.
Your name shortened, so it's the first.
Well, I want to get a lot in. Thank you so much both for affording us the opportunity to communicate on this. On the note of Yucca Mountain, hearing that uranium is trying to become a strategic mineral is somewhat of grave concern, because NEPA has currently been proposed under administrative processes, executive order to be gutted, essentially, so removing the public from actual involvement and influence on NEPA processes. So that is of grave concern. Having friends, personal close friends in the Diné Nation across Arizona, New Mexico, who suffer from inability to access the water in their aquifer from long time uranium mining, it's horrible. And having other friends in the Western Shoshone Nations here in the state of Nevada, grave concerns to the opening of Yucca Mountain. So I thank you so much, and I would love to be a resource in connecting those voices and helping champion those voices in any hearings possible.
We have public health and disparate effect. The Diné Nation, obviously, but it is a big issue. And even in discussions of permanently banning uranium mining around the Grand Canyon, was two reasons. It was the legacy that you mentioned, the public health risk, the economic issue, and what it does to that canyon and to the revenue that it brings to the state of Arizona. And then, there's no remediation, and there's no cleanup. There's billions of dollars. There's 600 years plus still left of cleanup for Navajo Nation, period. And so there's a lot of consequences, but I think the economic issue, the human issue, and for us in the West, having just resolved the conservation issue with the Colorado River to some extent, is protection of watersheds that are critical in terms of those of us that live in this part of the world understand that water's it. And that's at risk too. So I think there's very persuasive arguments beyond how do I get rid of my trash, which is kind of the argument that we're stuck with right now. Thank you.
Thank you.
And back on the issue of, while we in this room are adamantly oppose and have been for a long time. I have to say I was surprised at the lack of awareness of members of Congress around the impact to Yucca Mountain. I've done a CODEL, a bipartisan CODEL, taking members out to the site. I've been into Yucca Mountain, so I could see firsthand what it looks like and what the DOE's pitch is, if you will. But as we were lobbying to defeat the Shimkus amendment, there was a lot of, how do I say, just a lack of understanding of what this really means to us as people in Nevada, our major industries, economic standpoint. And it helps us to reinforce to our friends, Democrats on our side of the aisle who, might otherwise be persuaded to consider the other side. The other thing is, there is waste in other locations that is impacting this politically. Harley Ruda and Mike Levin in California, they have a major waste deposit right next to one of their military installations. And it's a real issue for them and their constituents. Derek Kelmer up in Washington State, same issue. So they're under pressure to come up with alternatives for storage or a solution. And, these are people who I work with every day on good public policy, on other issues, but when it comes to this issue, they're looking out for their backyard and their constituents.
Not in my backyard.
Right, and so I actually was quite alarmed with how many Democrats on our side of the aisle had voted for, it was HR, I wanted to speak, HR 2699 was the bill that came out of the House Energy and Commerce Committee. But the same bill moved, it was HR 3053 in 2017. That over 300 votes on the floor, including a majority of House Democrats. And so what I'm just saying is, this is no longer, and I don't know if it ever was, a strictly partisan thing where the Republicans were ramming this through on us. It is an issue where there are constituents that are impacted by this all over the country because the nuclear industry has gotten away for so long to not clean up their own waste. And because of it, I think we have over 100 nuclear plants across the country with waste, and that's a problem everywhere. So my only argument is, yes, we have to be vigilant. We have to have our kind of legislative process at our disposal and to work every avenue, which is what our delegation has done effectively to this point. But I think beyond that, we've got to start coming up with other approaches. One of the things that I've asked House leadership to do is to form a working group to discuss alternatives, consent-based alternatives, because if we only have to fight Yucca Mountain or no Yucca Mountain, we're always gonna be under this attack. And I don't know how long I'm gray now. I can't get much grayer when these bills come up, because I can just tell you, between my staff, Dina Titus, Susie Lee, I mean, we were working literally around the clock for several weeks, trying to get the votes to kill that Shimkus amendment. And people told us, it's moving, get over it. And we just said, we can't let that happen. We've gotta try to make the argument as much as we could. And so fortunately, like I said, we were able to flip 11 of the 14 Democrats on that committee who had previously voted for it. But we just can't let up. And we need different approaches. And so I'm looking for your insight. You all organize, not just here, but in other places. You know who some of these members are. They're our friends, some of them. I mean, in other respects, they worked with us on so many important issues. But when it comes to Yucca Mountain, this one is it's about your interest in your own backyard. So, other comments around Yucca Mountain? Dawn?
Congressman, thank you for inviting our organization here and sharing the days for the year. So probably something maybe that the rest of the room may not know, but the Nevada Resort Association is vehemently opposed to Yucca Mountain as well. And I think in one of the ways, and kind of the question I have goes along with yours, is that education to other members. But we worked with the American Gaming Association, and earlier this year we sent a letter to every member in Congress and the Senate, or in Congress and the House and Senate, about our opposition, and that was signed by the leaders of the gaming companies here. We had the AGA sign it. Our organization, again on our behalf of our members, sent a letter to every member of the House Energy and Commerce Committee. Particularly it's the economic issue, but certainly we live here, our employees live here, we care about the health and safety. That's certainly an item of vast importance. So, we stand by ready to help, and we talk with Congresswoman Titus's office quite a bit, and seen with Congresswoman Cicely. But look to you all as how we can use our voices and help with them.
Thank you, and thank you for, the advocacy when we needed it the most, because those efforts help. When people get inundated with letters, members of Congress, on an issue, it does matter. And that particularly, that advocacy at that time really did help swing a few of those members. And so, again, we'll continue to engage with you. Hopefully, there won't be an effort, at least on natural resources, based on the chairman's leadership, but whether it's a public lands omnibus, whether it's another appropriations bill, the nuclear industry is just unrelenting, and they're very, very sneaky. Yes?
Congressman, thank you. Building maybe somewhat on what John raised in terms of Nevada Resort Association, Get Outdoors Nevada has now been helping to nurture and be the home for the Nevada Outdoor Business Coalition. And one thought that I had as we were sitting here is how much has the Outdoor Industry Association engaged on an issue such as the